The only thing my husband Anthony asked of me as he said goodbye was, "Please, never go to the country house, Elizabeth, promise me." He squeezed my hand with the last traces of his strength, his eyes pleading. I promised him. I always respected his wishes, even when curiosity burned a hole inside me. Still, a few years after his death, I finally gave in to that curiosity, and what I found on that property changed my life forever. Now I clearly understand why my husband wanted so badly to keep me away from that place. But before we go on, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love seeing how far our stories travel. 17 years of marriage to Anthony ended in a hospital bed after a sudden stroke no one could have foreseen. At 58, I found myself a widow, with a daughter in college and a sense of emptiness that felt endless. While sorting through his things, I discovered there was much more to my husband than I had ever known. On an ordinary Tuesday, my husband's attorney, Mr. Hargrove, called me to his office. 2 months had already passed since the funeral. Life ground forward with a cruel appearance of normalcy while I was still trying to learn how to breathe without Anthony nearby. "There's something I'm supposed to give you, Mrs. Harris," Mr. Hargrove said, sliding a small box and an envelope across his polished wooden desk. Anthony had left specific instructions that the contents be given to me only after he was gone. Inside the box was an old, heavy key with a leaf-shaped metal keychain. The envelope had my name written in Anthony's unmistakable handwriting. "What is this key?" I asked, turning it between my fingers. "To a property in Charleston," the attorney replied. "Your husband bought it about 4 years ago, but he left clear instructions that you were to learn of it only after his passing." My heart started to race. Anthony had no properties besides our home. He had never mentioned a country house. And most unsettling of all, why had he made me promise never to go there, only to reveal its existence afterward? "It's called Cypress Estate," Mr. Hargrove continued. "Apparently, it was the house where Anthony spent part of his childhood. He bought it back after many years, though it had changed hands several times." "Wait, that doesn't make sense," I cut in. Anthony always avoided talking about his childhood. Whenever Charleston came up, he'd tense up and change the subject. Why would he buy a house there? The attorney adjusted his glasses before answering. "I couldn't say, ma'am, but there's an important detail. The property has become extremely valuable over the past 2 years." "How is that possible?" "A major developer is building a luxury resort in the area. Your husband's land sits at a strategic point. They've already made several offers in the millions of dollars for that house." My head spun. Anthony had never been wealthy. We lived comfortably on his salary as an engineer and mine as a university professor, but nothing that would allow a second home, least of all in Charleston. And why keep it a secret? With trembling fingers, I opened the envelope. "My dear Elizabeth, if you're reading this, it's because I left sooner than I expected. Forgive me for all the secrets I kept. The house is yours now. Over the past 4 years I turned that dark place from my childhood into something I hope you'll see as beautiful. I know I made you promise never to go there. But I'm releasing you from that promise now. In fact, I'm asking you to go at least once before deciding what to do with the property. In the study you'll find my laptop. The password is the date of our first meeting followed by the word, hope, the feeling you taught me to believe in again. I love you more than I ever managed to say. Anthony." I pressed the letter to my chest, tears blurring my vision. Even after he was gone, Anthony could still surprise me. "I need to see that place," I murmured. "I almost forgot to mention it," Mr. Hargrove interjected. "There's a complication. Anthony's family is contesting the will. His older brother, Michael Harris, claims Anthony wasn't of sound mind when he bought the property." "That's absurd," I answered, outraged. "My husband was the most clear-headed, grounded person I've ever known." Even so, they had already filed legal motions, and given the property's current value, it could turn into a complicated fight. I slipped the key into my pocket as a sudden resolve took hold of me. I'm going to Charleston today. 2 days later, after a long drive down the coast, I parked in front of a carved wooden gate with Cypress Estate in wrought iron. My heart pounded as I turned the key in the lock. The gate opened with a soft creak, revealing a property far more impressive than I had imagined. It wasn't just a country house, it was a true stone and wood mansion, surrounded by immaculately kept gardens and towering cypress trees. A stone path wound through flawless lawns to the main entrance. Everything looked new or recently renovated. Nothing there evoked the traumatic childhood Anthony had always refused to mention. The place had been transformed with love and care. My husband's touch was in every detail, though I had known nothing of its existence until that moment. My hands trembled as I slid the key into the lock. The lock turned with a satisfying click, and I stepped over the threshold into the secret world of the man I'd shared nearly 2 decades of life with. What I saw inside made me grip the doorframe to steady myself. The foyer opened into a grand, double-height great room with a stone fireplace. But it wasn't the architecture that stole my breath, it was the paintings. On every wall, in every available space, hung paintings of flowers, not just any flowers, but orchids of every type and color imaginable. My lifelong passion, which Anthony had always quietly encouraged, now surrounded me in a gallery dedicated to what I loved most. And there, on a table by the window overlooking the garden, rested a silver laptop with a single white orchid placed on its lid. Before I could take another step, the sound of tires on gravel told me I was no longer alone. Through the window I saw a black car pull up behind mine. 3 men got out, each one bearing an unmistakable resemblance to Anthony, the same straight nose, the same almond-shaped eyes. The Harris clan had arrived, and judging by the stern look on their faces, they were not there to welcome the widow to her newly discovered property. They approached with the confidence of men who believed they owned the place. I quickly shut the front door, my heart racing. From a side window, I watched them stop on the porch, whispering to each other until the eldest, an older, grayer version of Anthony, pounded firmly on the door. "Mrs. Harris, we know you're in there. We need to talk." His voice carried the same tone Anthony had whenever he was nervous. I stayed silent, moving away from the door. Anthony's vague warnings about his family had always been clear. Now, with them right in front of me, my instinct screamed caution. The pounding came again, this time harder. "Elizabeth, I'm Michael Harris, Anthony's older brother. These are my brothers Andrew and Mark. We're here about the property." Of course. They weren't there for Anthony, nor to meet the woman their brother had loved for 17 years. They were there for the house that had suddenly become worth millions. I looked toward the laptop on the table. The answers I needed were likely inside it, not with the strangers on the porch. Ignoring the increasingly aggressive pounding, I sat down, typed in the password, the date of our first meeting followed by the word hope, and the screen came to life. A folder titled For Elizabeth opened. Inside were hundreds of video files, each one dated in chronological order, beginning soon after the funeral and continuing for an entire year. With trembling hands, I clicked on the first file. Anthony's face filled the screen. Not the pale, frail face from his final days in the hospital, but a healthy face full of life, which he had recorded months earlier. "Hello, love." He smiled in that crooked way that always melted me. "If you're watching this video, it means I'm gone and you've come to this place, despite all the years I begged you not to. I should have known you wouldn't resist the temptation, especially after Mr. Hargrove told you about the house." A lump formed in my throat as I realized he still knew me too well. "I recorded one video for every day of your first year without me, to keep you company through the grief. An entire year to explain what I should have shared with you in life." He looked down for a moment, then met my eyes again with determination, beginning with the real reason he had repurchased the house he once swore never to set foot in again. Outside, the pounding on the door had stopped. Through the window I saw the men returning to their car, gathering papers and talking with grim expressions. Anthony continued. 3 years ago, I was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm, a ticking time bomb I inherited from my father. The doctors told me I had between 2 and 5 years to live. I chose not to tell you or Sarah. I didn't want your pity, nor did I want our last years overshadowed by death. His eyes softened. All I wanted was to live fully with you until the end, not to slowly fade away in front of you. Shock and anger overwhelmed me. He had hidden the diagnosis, made medical decisions without me. He had denied me the chance to prepare, to consciously savor our final moments. I know you're angry now, he said, as if reading my thoughts. You have every right, but I hope you understand I made that decision out of love, not cowardice. Meanwhile, outside, the men were making phone calls and pacing with the frustrated energy of people who felt robbed of a right. When I got my diagnosis, I decided to use the time I had left to create something meaningful for you. You've always been fascinated by orchids, always talking about your dream of one day having a space just for yourself to grow them. That's why I returned to the last place anyone would expect me to be, the house I abandoned at 18, swearing never to return. He leaned closer to the camera. What my brothers don't know is that I legally bought the house from my father before he died. The old man was ruined after years of gambling and drinking. He sold it to me for a fraction of its value, desperate for money, making me promise not to tell my brothers, who still believed they'd inherit it someday. That explains the legal challenge. They think they have rights to a property I actually bought legitimately. The house was in ruins when I acquired it, Elizabeth, just like in my childhood, but this time I had the means to transform it. Every business trip I claimed in the past 4 years was actually spent here, overseeing renovations, building something for you. Outside, my brothers had come back to the door. This time Michael held a document against the window for me to see, some kind of court order. My brothers will come after this house, Anthony went on in the video, his face hardening. They never wanted this property until last year, when the developer began the resort project. Suddenly the worthless estate they mocked me for became a gold mine. They'll do anything to take it from you. One of them spoke on the phone again, and the triumphant look on his face afterward was unmistakable. In the bottom drawer of this desk, you'll find a blue folder with all the legal documents you need. The house is unquestionably yours, I made sure of that. Anthony's expression softened. But Elizabeth, whether you keep it or sell it, the choice will be yours alone. I built this place with you in mind, filled it with beauty for you, but I don't want it to become a burden. A police cruiser was pulling up the drive. My brothers watched its arrival with looks of satisfaction. One last thing, Anthony said. In the greenhouse behind the house, you'll find the collection of rare orchids I spent years cultivating. The staff I hired will continue to care for them, whether you're here or not. They're my last gift to you, along with the means to appreciate them. The video froze on Anthony's smile just as the knocking at the door resumed, this time more authoritative. Mrs. Harris, Officer Torres, County Police. Please open the door. With a deep sigh, I closed the laptop, pulled the blue folder from the drawer, and braced myself for what would come next. As my hand reached for the doorknob, my phone rang. It was Sarah, our daughter, calling from college. I hesitated a moment, then answered. Sarah, this isn't a good time, I said. Mom, she said, her voice tight, sharp with irritation. Why didn't you tell me about Dad's house or the developer's proposal? My uncles just called me offering a fair deal if I help them contest the will. What on earth is going on? So they had already gotten to my daughter. That revelation lit a fierce, protective instinct inside me. They weren't just coming after me, they were trying to manipulate my grieving child. I'll explain everything later, I promised, watching the officer speaking with the brothers. But Sarah, don't sign anything, don't agree to anything. Those men are not our friends. Mom, if there's money involved. This isn't about money, I cut her off, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. "This is about what your father wanted. Please, trust me." There was a moment of silence until she sighed. "All right, but call me as soon as you can." I hung up and opened the door to face the young police officer flanked by the three Harris brothers, their expressions ranging from smug to openly hostile. "Mrs. Harris, I'm Officer Torres. These gentlemen are presenting a civil court order related to an inheritance dispute. I'm here to keep the peace while you review the paperwork." I smiled calmly, summoning the strength Anthony had always admired in me. "Of course, officer, but I think you should look at this first." I handed him the blue folder with the documentation Anthony had so carefully prepared. My husband had foreseen this exact situation. Michael stepped forward with a dismissive gesture. "Family disputes are complicated, officer. My sister-in-law is understandably emotional and confused." "Actually," I cut in firmly, "I'm neither emotional nor confused. I'm a widow on the property that legally belongs to me, facing three strangers whose only connection to my late husband is blood." I turned to the officer. "I'd appreciate it if you reviewed these documents before letting anyone cross the threshold of my home." The officer took the folder and began examining its contents with a neutral expression. The Harris brothers exchanged uneasy glances, their confidence starting to falter. I thought of Anthony's video, of the secret he had kept to spare Sarah and me unnecessary pain, of the extraordinary gift he had created in his final years. Whatever game his brothers were playing, I was determined not to lose the last tangible expression of my husband's love without a fight. The officer looked up from the papers, his expression shifting. "Everything appears to be in order, ma'am. A clear deed transfer, notarized statements, certified bank records of the original purchase." He turned to the brothers. "Gentlemen, I see no reason to force an inspection today. This is clearly a matter for the civil courts." Michael's face flushed red with anger. "This is ridiculous. That woman has no right." "That woman," I interrupted calmly, "is Anthony Harris's wife, and she has every right to be here." As the brothers reluctantly retreated toward their car, followed by the apologetic officer, I felt a strange mix of loss and revelation. The man I thought I had known completely had kept secrets, some painful, others breathtakingly beautiful. Now I stood at a crossroads, retreat into the safety of the life I once knew or fully embrace this unexpected legacy and the battle that came with it. I shut the door, returned to the table, and powered the laptop back on. The video prepared for the next day awaited me, along with new revelations about the man I had loved, and was only now beginning to truly understand. Outside, the Harris brothers might have lost this first confrontation, but the looks on their faces as they left made something inevitable clear: the battle for Cypress Estate had only just begun. That night I stayed in Anthony's house, or rather, in our house, surrounded by all the evidence of his secret labor of love. Sleep was impossible, my mind overwhelmed by the revelations, the fatal illness he had hidden, the transformation of the house, his brother's determination to claim it, and the hundreds of video messages waiting on the computer. At dawn I resolved to calmly explore the property for the first time. The main house was a true masterpiece of renovation, where the original rustic elements blended seamlessly with modern comfort. Every room reflected careful attention to my own tastes, from the library filled with first editions of my favorite books to a reading nook perfectly positioned with a view of the garden, ideal for autumn mornings. But it was the greenhouse that truly took my breath away. Just as Anthony had promised in one of his videos, an astonishing collection of orchids unfolded there. Some were so rare I had only ever seen them in specialized manuals. Among them stood out a Coerulia cultivar of Cattleya, nearly impossible to find, blooming proudly as the undeniable queen of the place. "Good morning, ma'am," said a voice that startled me. From between the plants emerged a middle-aged woman with a spray bottle in hand. "I'm Mary. Your husband hired me to take care of the orchids." "Elizabeth Harris," I replied, shaking her hand, though I suspected she already knew. She smiled kindly. "Mr. Harris spoke about you often during his visits." He said you had a special gift with plants, something he never quite mastered himself. Did you get to know my husband well? I asked cautiously. Mary hesitated for a moment. As much as he allowed anyone, I suppose. He came at least once a month for the past 4 years and personally oversaw everything. That matched the image I had of Anthony, meticulous, attentive to every detail, always inclined to do everything himself rather than delegate. The blue cattleya over there, Mary continued, pointing to the orchid I was gazing at. He spent almost 2 years searching for it. He said it reminded him of one you had seen at an exhibition and never forgot. My heart tightened. I remembered that orchid exhibition at Longwood Gardens 10 years ago. I had mentioned that flower only once, and Anthony had stored it away in his memory. Did he ever mention anything about his health? I dared to ask. A shadow crossed Mary's face. Not directly, but in recent months he pushed himself much harder. He worked for hours, like a man who felt he had limited time. That confirmation hit me hard, but it also helped me understand the urgency I had sensed in Anthony during his final months. I had attributed it to work stress, never imagining he was building all this while knowing his life was running out. His brothers were here yesterday, I commented, carefully watching Mary's reaction. Her face hardened. They started hanging around as soon as Blue Coast Resort announced the project. Suddenly they showed a great interest in the family house, a place they hadn't set foot in for decades. She adjusted the irrigation system and went on. What can I say about them? Michael is the eldest, owner of an investment company in Boston. He always treated Anthony as though acknowledging him was doing him a favor. Andrew is the middle one, a lawyer, smooth with words. Mark is the youngest, always in Michael's shadow. She shook her head. When Anthony came back to buy the property, they mocked him, saying he was wasting money on a worthless hole. That is, until construction of the resort began. That matched the fragments Anthony had shared over the years, his difficult childhood, his escape to college, his refusal to talk about his family. They'll be back, I said softly, more to myself than to Mary. Without a doubt, she nodded, but Mr. Harris prepared for that. He always thought several steps ahead. Back in the house, I forced myself to eat something before opening the laptop again to watch the day's video. Anthony appeared on the screen, seated in what I now recognized as the mansion's library. Good morning, my love. I hope you slept well in our new home, he said with that crooked smile I missed so much, a smile that physically hurt to see again. Today I want to show you something special. The camera followed Anthony down a hallway I hadn't yet explored, stopping at a locked door. This room is just for you. The key is in the top drawer of the nightstand, the old silver one with the orchid carving. I paused the video, went to the main bedroom, and found the key exactly where he said it would be. Following Anthony's path in the video, I reached a discreet door at the end of the east wing. The key turned smoothly, and as I pushed the door open, the air left my lungs in a gasp. A spacious art studio, fully equipped, filled that corner room, bathed in perfect light from floor-to-ceiling windows. Easels, canvases, paints, brushes, everything an artist could ever want, arranged with loving precision. I hadn't painted in 15 years. After art school, I had set aside my artistic dreams to teach literature, supporting us while Anthony built his career and we raised Sarah. Over time, that someday became a distant dream, then a painful reminder of an abandoned path. The video continued, and Anthony's voice drew me back to the laptop in my hands. You gave up so much for us, Elizabeth. Painting was your first sacrifice. Even though you never complained, I always promised myself I'd give it back to you one day. Tears blurred my vision as I looked around the studio, the professional materials, the reference books neatly arranged on the shelves, the windows positioned to capture the perfect light. There's more, Anthony added. Look in the cabinet under the window bench. I moved to the cushioned bench by the window overlooking the garden, now bathed in golden morning light. Built into the wall beneath it, I found a cabinet I would have overlooked had he not told me to search for it. Inside was a flat archival box. With trembling hands, I lifted the lid and fell to my knees, overwhelmed. My paintings, dozens of them, all the work I had done in college, pieces I thought long lost in our many moves. Anthony had kept them safe for 15 years, returning them to me in this perfect place. On top lay a small canvas I recognized instantly, my final project before graduation, a self-portrait of a young woman gazing at the future with eyes full of possibility. Anthony had asked to keep it the day I finished it. Attached was a handwritten note: "She's still there, Elizabeth, the woman who once painted with such passion and vision." I pressed the note to my chest, overcome by love and pain in equal measure. Anthony had truly seen me, in a way no one else had for years. The sound of cars crunching over gravel tore me from the moment. From the studio window I watched two vehicles approach, the familiar black car of the Harris brothers and, behind it, a silver one I recognized immediately. Sarah had arrived, and from the confidence in her step as she walked toward her uncles, I knew they had already begun to influence her. My daughter, Anthony's daughter, with his dark hair and my stubbornness, smiled as she shook hands with men she had never met before. The fragile peace I had found in Anthony's posthumous gifts vanished in an instant with this new complication. The battle for Cypress Estate had just become much more personal. I watched from the window as Sarah exchanged warm greetings with her uncles, her body language open and receptive. At 21, our daughter had her father's analytical mind and my determination, but none of Anthony's patience or my caution. She had always been quick to form opinions and slow to change them. My phone buzzed with a message from her: "I arrived with Uncle Michael, and the others are coming in now. We need to talk." Uncle Michael. They had known each other for less than a day, and already he claimed a family bond. I tucked Anthony's note into my pocket, closed the studio, and went to face this new alliance. Sarah walked in without knocking, claiming her right as a daughter, and behind her the Harris brothers followed like wolves trailing unsuspecting prey. "Mom," Sarah hugged me quickly and stepped back, her eyes roaming the stunning room. "This place is incredible. Why didn't Dad ever tell us about it?" Before I could answer, Michael stepped forward. His resemblance to Anthony was so painfully strong I struggled to meet his gaze. "Elizabeth, I think we got off on the wrong foot yesterday. Your sudden arrival surprised us as much as ours surprised you," he said in a conciliatory tone that clashed with the calculating look in his eyes. At his side, Andrew and Mark kept neutral expressions, though Andrew held a leather folder that undoubtedly contained legal documents. "Sarah," I said, ignoring Michael entirely, "I thought we agreed you wouldn't get involved with your father's brothers until we had spoken." She blushed. "They called again this morning with a very reasonable proposal. I thought I should at least hear them out in person." Her chin lifted in defiance. "Besides, they're my family too." "A family you didn't even know existed until yesterday," I reminded her gently. "Just like Dad hid this house from us," she shot back. "Doesn't that seem strange to you? What else was he hiding?" The question came dangerously close to the secrets revealed in Anthony's videos. "Your father had a complicated relationship with his brothers," I answered cautiously. "He had his reasons for keeping his distance." Michael waved a dismissive hand. "Old stories. Every family has disputes between siblings. What matters is moving forward together." "Exactly," Sarah agreed, with the earnestness of someone who believes she's being perfectly reasonable. "Uncle Michael explained everything to me. This house has been in the Harris family for generations. Dad bought it from his father, Francis Harris, but everyone assumed it would eventually be shared among the brothers." I stifled a sigh. They had worked on her for less than a day, and already she was repeating their version of events. "And the sudden interest in this property has nothing to do with the luxury resort being built next door?" I asked softly. Andrew opened his folder. "The real estate aspect is just one part of a complex legal situation. We've prepared a fair settlement proposal that honors Anthony's wishes while recognizing the Harris family's historic right to the property. We're willing to be very generous, Michael added, laying a paternal hand on Sarah's shoulder. 1/3 for you, Elizabeth, 1/3 for Sarah, and 1/3 divided among the three of us. Everyone wins. Sarah looked at me expectantly, clearly swayed by the offer. It makes sense, Mom. We don't need a house this big. We could sell everything, walk away with millions, and Dad's family would stay united. Your father left this property to me, I said, locking eyes with Michael. Not to you, and not to his brothers. Out of confusion and sentimentality, he replied smoothly. Anthony wasn't thinking clearly in his final years. A flash of anger shot through me. My husband was perfectly lucid until the day he died. Then why all the secrecy? Mark asked for the first time, his voice softer but just as sharp. Why hide the purchase of the property from his wife and daughter? Why arrange everything through an attorney? Those aren't the decisions of a man in his right mind. I thought of the videos, the renovated house, the art studio. Every detail meticulously planned as a final gift. Nothing suggested confusion or decline. Mom, Sarah said in a gentler tone. I know this is hard. Dad is gone, and now we're discovering all these secrets. But this proposal makes financial sense. We'd be secure for the rest of our lives. The door opened behind them, and Mary appeared with a worried expression. Is everything all right, Mrs. Harris? I saw the cars arrive. The brothers turned, visibly annoyed by the interruption. This is a family matter, Michael said, narrowing his eyes. Mary is my employee, I replied firmly. She's welcome in my home. Actually, Andrew interjected, her employment situation is part of the assets under dispute, subject to our legal claim. Mary stood her ground. Mr. Harris hired me personally. He made me promise to look after this place and Mrs. Harris if anything ever happened to him. We'll review all employee contracts, Michael said with disdain. I've heard enough, I cut in. It's time for you to leave. I looked them directly in the eyes, then softened my gaze toward my daughter. Except for you, of course, Sarah. You're always welcome. You're not even going to consider their offer? She asked incredulously. I'll review any proposal in writing with my own attorney, but I won't accept pressure in my home. Michael's conciliatory mask slipped, revealing the ruthless businessman underneath. This property is worth tens of millions with the resort project. We can resolve this amicably, or we can make it very difficult. Is that a threat? I asked, calmer than I felt. Simply a statement of reality, he corrected. You're a university professor facing a legal battle against adversaries with far greater resources. Anthony may have had good intentions, but he left you in an unsustainable position. I thought of the blue folder with its documents, the videos proving his clarity and foresight, the property that represented his final act of love. I believe my husband knew exactly what he was doing, I said steadily. Now, please, leave. Sarah, you can stay for lunch if you like. She looked torn, glancing between me and her newly discovered uncles. I think I'll go with them for now. We have things to discuss, she said before giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. Think about the offer, Mom, please. I watched them leave, an empty feeling spreading through me. In just 24 hours, my daughter had been pulled into the orbit of the very men Anthony had avoided his entire life. Mary waited until the cars disappeared down the drive before she spoke. Mrs. Harris, there's something you need to know, something your husband asked me not to mention unless it became absolutely necessary. I turned to her, mentally exhausted but forcing myself to listen. What is it? It's about the property's true extent and what's really hidden here, she said, pointing toward the greenhouse. We'd better walk. As I followed her through the garden, the morning sun lit the magnificent grounds Anthony had secretly created. Whatever revelation awaited me, I felt certain of one thing: Anthony had anticipated this fight, perhaps even Sarah's vulnerability to her uncle's manipulation. The question was whether he had prepared me enough to face a battle I'd never imagined. Mary led me past the main greenhouse to an old tool shed I hadn't explored. Unlike the perfectly renovated buildings across the estate, this one retained its original rustic look, as if it had been deliberately left unimproved to seem unimportant. "Your husband was a very cautious man," Mary said, revealing an old iron key. "After his brother's first visit last year, he became even more careful." "They came before?" I asked, surprised. Anthony had never mentioned it. Mary nodded gravely. "They showed up unannounced as soon as they learned about the resort project. Your husband was here overseeing construction of the art studio." "And what happened?" "They didn't recognize him at first. He'd grown a beard during treatment." The casual mention of Anthony's treatment hit me like a fresh wave of grief. While I naively kept teaching literature, my ailing husband was here building this sanctuary and fending off predatory brothers. "He watched them from a distance and left without revealing himself," Mary explained. "That same night he made changes to the property plans." She unlocked the shed door and added, "And he started with this." The door opened onto a simple interior: gardening tools, equipment, and dust motes dancing in shafts of light that slipped through the wall boards. Mary walked confidently to the back, moved aside stacked boxes, and uncovered a hatch set into the concrete floor. "Your husband installed this entrance last winter. The workers thought they were building a wine cellar." She pulled up the heavy panel, revealing a sturdy staircase descending into darkness. "After you." Curiosity won out over apprehension, and I followed Mary down. At the bottom, she flicked a switch, and a series of lights illuminated a concrete tunnel stretching ahead of us. "What is this place?" I asked. "Your husband called it the vault. I prefer to call it genius." The tunnel ran for about 100 feet before opening into a wide room filled with files, a desk with computer equipment, and walls covered in maps and documents. "Welcome to Anthony's war room," Mary said, pride in her voice. "Here is everything he gathered about his brothers, their businesses, and the true value of Cypress Estate." I stepped closer to the nearest wall. A detailed map showed not only the estate but also the surrounding area for several miles. Red markings indicated the locations of the resort project, with handwritten notes on values, construction phases, and real estate impacts. "I don't understand," I said, turning to Mary. "Did Anthony already know about the resort project?" "No. At first he bought this place solely to renovate it for you. But a couple of years ago, when Blue Coast Resort began preliminary studies, he hired a real estate consultancy to assess the impact on the estate." Mary pointed to the map. "They discovered something the developer was trying to keep quiet until they finished buying up the land." "What was it?" "The full project is 3 times larger than they publicly announced." I studied the map more closely and saw how the markings extended far beyond what the press had reported. "Phase 2 of the resort will include a golf course that requires parts of the properties neighboring ours," Mary continued. "They've already bought almost all of the parcels they need, except Cypress Estate." I began to understand. Without this property, the project loses half of its projected value. Exactly. Your husband confirmed this with 3 independent experts. The estate's strategic position can completely block the planned expansion. That's why the property is even more valuable than his brother's suspect, exponentially. But that's not all. Mary went to a file cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Anthony documented decades of questionable business practices by his brothers: tax evasion, insider trading, embezzlement of client funds, enough evidence to ruin them professionally if it ever became public. I flipped through the pages with trembling hands. There were printed emails, financial records, sworn statements from former employees. The approach was meticulous, exhaustive. Anthony had built an airtight case against them. Why would he gather all this? I asked. Protection, Mary replied, sitting down at the table and motioning me to a chair. He knew they'd come after the house as soon as he was gone. He wanted you to have weapons to defend yourself. I thought of Michael's smug confidence, Andrew's legal maneuvers, the speed with which they had tried to win over Sarah. Yes, Anthony had foreseen everything. Not everything, Mary corrected calmly. He didn't expect them to target your daughter so quickly. The memory of Sarah's apparent betrayal stung like a fresh wound. They're manipulating her with half-truths and promises of wealth. And they're doing it by exploiting her grief, Mary said. She lost her father, and suddenly they're offering her a connection to him through blood and shared history. For a grieving young woman, that's a powerful lure. She was right. Sarah had always been a daddy's girl, sharing his analytical mind and his love of puzzles. His death had left her adrift, vulnerable to anyone offering a link to him. What do I do now? I asked, almost to myself. That depends on what you want, Mary answered. You could sell everything and walk away rich, though you might lose your daughter forever. You could fight your brothers-in-law in court with this evidence and maybe win, but at the cost of reopening even deeper family wounds. And the other option? The one your husband always preferred, thinking 3 steps ahead and finding the path no one expects. As I reflected on her words, I kept looking around the war room. On the table I noticed a framed photograph I had never seen before. In it, a teenage Anthony stood proudly beside an award-winning orchid, his face glowing with a rare, innocent joy I had seldom seen in the man I married. That was the first cattleya he ever grew, Mary said, noticing my attention. The only bright memory of his childhood here. And what happened to it? His brothers destroyed it while he was at school, just to hurt him. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Anthony's unwavering support for my love of flowers and art, even though they weren't his passions, took on a new meaning. The greenhouse and the studio weren't just gifts. They were a way of reclaiming something precious his brothers had stolen from him. I picked up the photograph, and a plan began to take shape in my mind. Mary, does the laptop with Anthony's videos work down here too? Yes, she nodded. There's a secure network across the entire estate. Your husband made sure of it. Perfect. I need to watch some videos earlier than planned. And then I want you to arrange a meeting for me. With whom? First with my daughter, alone, away from her uncle's influence. Then with my attorney, Mr. Robinson. I turned toward the wall covered in evidence against his brothers. And finally, I think I want to meet with the executives from Blue Coast Resort. For the first time since we had entered the hidden bunker, Mary smiled. You're planning something your husband would have approved of. I'm planning something worthy of the man who loved me enough to create all this, I replied with new determination. And I'll need your help. Whatever you need, Mrs. Harris, Mary promised. Your husband gave me a second chance when no one else would have. I owe everything to him, and, by extension, to you. It was another side of Anthony I hadn't known, his quiet generosity, extending beyond our family and changing lives I had never even heard of. As we left the bunker and carefully sealed the hidden entrance, I felt a strange sense of connection to my late husband. It wasn't the grief that had consumed me in recent weeks, but something different, as though he were still present beyond death. Anthony had left me not only property and financial security, but also tools and knowledge to chart my own path. The Harris brothers thought they were facing a naive widow out of her depth. They had no idea what was coming. In the next 48 hours I barely slept, driven by determination and a growing clarity in my plan. In one night I watched the equivalent of a week's worth of Anthony's videos, each one revealing more of his strategy and the depth of his foresight. They'll try to divide and conquer, he warned in one recording, as though speaking directly about my current situation. Michael will play the friendly face, Andrew the legal threat, Mark the silent observer, Anthony said. And they'll target Sarah. She's the easiest path to destabilize you. In another video, he showed documents from the developer that he had obtained through contacts at City Hall. Blue Coast Resort was planning to keep Phase 2 of the project secret until they had secured all the necessary land. If they find out you know about the golf course before they try to buy us out, the negotiating value triples, he explained in the recording. Armed with his revelations and my own growing understanding, I arranged a meeting with Sarah at a cafe in Boston, far from the influence of the Harris brothers and the emotional pull of the sanctuary her father had created. She arrived 15 minutes late, already defensive before even sitting down. "I can't stay long. Uncle Michael is taking me to meet some investors this afternoon." "Uncle Michael?" I repeated softly. "You've gotten very close in just 3 days." She flushed. "They've been kind and welcoming, much more than you. You're treating Dad's family like their enemies." I sipped my coffee, choosing my words carefully. "Do you remember that narrative theory class you loved in your first semester, about how the same story changes depending on who tells it? And what does that have to do with this? That you've only heard their version. I want to ask you to consider your father's perspective." "Dad is dead," she shot back sharply, pain flashing across her face. "And clearly he didn't trust us enough to tell us about this place while he was alive." I pulled a tablet from my bag. "Actually, he did leave something for both of us." "What is that?" "Your father recorded videos, Sarah. Hundreds of messages to guide me, to guide us, after he was gone." I opened the one Anthony had labeled for Sarah, "When you need it." My daughter's face went pale. "He made videos? He knew he was dying?" "Yes." My voice was gentle, finally sharing the truth. 3 years ago, he was diagnosed with a brain aneurysm. He chose not to tell us. He wanted to spare us from watching him fade. "That's impossible." "He would have told me." But doubt was already creeping into her voice. "Watch the video, Sarah. Listen to him." With trembling fingers, she pressed play. Anthony's face appeared on the screen, healthy, vibrant, his smile crinkling his eyes the way it always did. "Hello, my brilliant girl," he said. "If you're watching this, I'm already gone. And knowing you, you're probably angry at all the secrets I kept." He chuckled softly. "You never liked being kept in the dark, not even as a child." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as her father went on. "I should have told you I was sick. I should have given you time to prepare, to ask the questions you're so good at asking. But I was selfish. I wanted our last years to be normal, not overshadowed by my diagnosis. I hope you can forgive me someday." Anthony leaned toward the camera. "But there's something else you need to know, something about my brothers I never shared with you. Our break wasn't just a family quarrel. They cheated me out of my inheritance when I was 19. They used my name on forged documents while I was in college. And when I discovered it and threatened to expose them, they threatened to implicate me as a willing accomplice." Sarah's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes never left the screen. "I left Charleston, moved to Boston, met your mother, built a life, raised you. That was enough. But my brothers never changed." His expression hardened. "Whatever they tell you now, remember this: they want the family estate not out of sentiment, but out of pure greed. And they won't hesitate to use anyone, including my daughter, to get it." The video froze on Anthony's troubled face. Sarah sat motionless, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. "He was protecting us," she whispered at last. "All this time, from far more than just his illness," I confirmed gently. "Your uncles aren't the family connection they pretend to be. They're opportunists who see you as the easiest way in." She wiped her tears. On her face, grief gave way to anger. "They've been lying to me, haven't they? In the essentials, yes. The house is worth millions, that's true. But they never told you the full scope of the resort project, or why this property is critical to the developer's plans. Realization lit her eyes. So they're trying to scam us. Exactly. I felt hope rising. And that means you're back on my side, daughter. I was never off your side, she murmured, lowering her gaze in shame. I just wanted to feel close to Dad through his family. They had childhood stories, photos I'd never seen. I understand. I took her hand. Grief makes us vulnerable. But now we need to be smarter, together. Sarah straightened. Her expression shifted from devastation to determination, so much like Anthony's that it made my heart ache. What's the plan? I smiled, feeling the first spark of confidence since all this began. First, tonight we meet with my attorney, not the family lawyer your uncles are pushing, but the one Anthony recommended. Tomorrow we'll meet with Blue Coast Resort. Why? Because information is power. And now we know something they don't, what the property is truly worth to the developer. I showed her the documents from Anthony's war room. They think they're dealing with an uninformed widow and a naive niece. It's time to show them who they're up against. For the first time since her father's death, Sarah laughed with genuine amusement. Dad always said you were the smartest person he'd ever met, that behind the calm literature professor was a strategist who could outmaneuver anyone if she was motivated enough. He really said that? I asked, surprised. All the time. She smiled, wiping away the last of her tears. He also said the biggest mistake anyone could make was underestimating Elizabeth Harris. As we left the cafe together, I felt the battle's momentum shift. The Harris brothers, without realizing it, had united us instead of dividing us. Their apparent early success with Sarah had been nothing more than the prelude to their defeat. Later that night, with Sarah at my side, I laid out my full plan to Mr. Robinson, the attorney Anthony had recommended for this exact scenario. His expression moved from professional interest to open admiration as he grasped the scope of what I proposed. Mrs. Harris, he said at last, your husband warned me you'd impress me with your strategic ability. He was right. My husband was right about many things, I answered, including his faith that I would not only survive his absence, but come out stronger from the crucible of grief and betrayal. The Harris brothers arrived at Cypress Estate at exactly 10 o'clock, just as I expected, 3 days after my meeting with Sarah. Their black car rolled up the drive with the confidence of men who believed victory was already assured. Behind them came a silver sedan I didn't recognize, presumably their attorney or financial advisor. I watched from the study window, no longer in the casual clothes they'd seen before, but in a tailored suit I had bought expressly for this meeting. Appearances mattered. I had no intention of presenting myself as a grieving widow, but as the formidable adversary Anthony had always known me to be. They're here, I told Sarah. She stepped out of the library looking just as professional, in a navy dress and her father's watch, one of his most prized possessions, worn proudly on her wrist. Ready? She asked, nerves and resolve both visible in her face. Completely. I squeezed her hand. Remember, let them corner themselves. Mary appeared. The others came in through the back. They're in the dining room, as you requested. I nodded, grateful. Right on cue. The bell rang, and Mary greeted them with the rehearsed courtesy of someone who knew her role in a carefully staged presentation. Good morning, gentlemen, she greeted them. Mrs. Harris and her daughter Sarah are expecting you. They entered with the ease of men accustomed to dominating any room. Michael led, followed by Andrew with his ever-present legal folder, and Mark bringing up the rear. Behind them came a gray-haired man in an expensive suit radiating corporate authority. Elizabeth, Michael nodded, smiling without the warmth reaching his eyes. Thank you for agreeing to this meeting. This is James Carter, Chief Financial Officer of Northern Investments. We thought a specialist would be helpful to discuss the property's potential. So they'd brought in an executive to intimidate me with technicalities and market valuations. Predictable. How considerate, I replied pleasantly. I've set up the dining room for our meeting. This way. I led them through the house, noting how they appraised the renovations Anthony had completed. In the dining room, the large table was set with documents at every place, water bottles, and coffee, projecting an image of professional preparation. Please, take your seats, I said. I think we have a great deal to discuss. They settled in with confidence, convinced they were in control. I remained standing at the head of the table. Before we begin, I said, thank you for your earlier proposal. It was instructive. Michael's smile widened, certain he was achieving his aim. We're glad you considered it. With Mr. Carter's expertise, we can discuss a favorable arrangement to divide the property. Yes, division, I said, picking up the remote from the table. That's exactly what I wanted to talk about. I pressed a button, and a screen descended from the ceiling. The brothers exchanged surprised looks. They hadn't expected this level of preparation. Please direct your attention here, I continued, projecting a detailed map of Cypress Estate with all its boundaries, topography, and relation to the surrounding area. This is the full survey, about 62 acres, not just the 10 you mentioned in your proposal. Andrew shifted uncomfortably. The western section is a non-buildable conservation area. We left it out for simplicity. How thoughtful, I replied, dryly, except for one small detail. Another click, and the map overlaid the complete resort project, including the undisclosed phases and the golf course Blue Coast Resort had kept under wraps. James Carter leaned toward the screen, his professional facade cracking as he studied the data with renewed interest. As you can see, I said calmly, Phase 2 of the project extends directly into the western section of our property, the very part you so generously offered to exclude. Michael's face turned crimson. Those projections are pure speculation. The analysis from Northern Investments shows that. Those projections were confirmed by Blue Coast Resort's own board of directors, a firm voice interrupted. Heads turned as Mr. Thompson, Chief Executive Officer of Blue Coast Resort, entered the room, and my attorney, Mr. Robinson, came in as well. What is the meaning of this? Michael demanded, half rising from his chair. This, I replied pleasantly, is a meeting about the true value and the future of Cypress Estate. Mr. Thompson has expressed a legitimate interest in the property, especially after reviewing the complete documentation my husband compiled on the project. James Carter shot an accusatory look at the Harris brothers. You assured me you had exclusive negotiating rights for this estate. They don't, Mr. Robinson interjected calmly, placing documents on the table. Mrs. Harris is the sole owner with clear title. The papers they showed you have no legal validity. Michael slammed the table in fury. This estate has belonged to the Harris family for generations. Anthony had a moral obligation. Moral obligation? Sarah spoke up for the first time, her voice steady though her hands clenched her glass tightly. Like the moral obligation you had to my father when you defrauded his inheritance? When you forged his signature? When you threatened to frame him if he exposed you? The three of them froze, their faces draining of color. What is she talking about? James Carter asked, visibly unsettled. Perhaps this will clarify things, I said, nodding to my attorney. He distributed sealed envelopes to everyone at the table, copies of the documentation Anthony had spent years compiling on his brother's shady dealings. Maybe the statute of limitations has expired on some of these cases, but the tax authorities will find plenty of interest. Andrew opened his envelope, paling with every page. These are private family matters, irrelevant to this negotiation. On the contrary, I countered, taking my seat at the head of the table, they demonstrate a pattern of fraud that directly undermines your credibility. And they prove you deliberately misled Mr. Carter about your supposed negotiating position on this property. Silence filled the room as the Harris brothers realized the magnitude of their exposure. Anthony had documented everything, their past crimes, their recent manipulations, their attempts to seize what was never theirs. What do you want from us? Michael finally asked, his mask of confidence shattered. I want you to leave Cypress Estate and never return. My voice was firm, final. I want you to stop immediately any attempts to contest my ownership or to manipulate my daughter. In return, these documents will remain private. James Carter rose abruptly, visibly uncomfortable. I believe my involvement in this matter was based on incomplete and potentially fraudulent information, he declared firmly. If you'll excuse me, Mrs. Harris, I will be contacting you directly from now on for any future discussions. Before leaving, he cast a hard, disdainful glance at the Harris brothers, who were left stunned by the sudden loss of their ally. Michael's face burned red with fury as he watched Carter leave the room. You have no idea what you're doing, Elizabeth, he spat, frustration in his voice. The development costs for the western section are prohibitive. The logistics alone are a nightmare. Actually, Mr. Thompson interjected with controlled calm, at Blue Coast Resort we've developed innovative construction methods designed specifically for terrains like this. We are prepared to make you an offer, Mrs. Harris, that acknowledges both the challenges and the extraordinary potential of this property. The atmosphere in the room shifted instantly. What was supposed to be the Harris brothers' perfect ambush had turned into something entirely different, my carefully orchestrated counterattack. I exchanged a glance with Sarah, who gave me a faint smile. In that simple expression were pride, a sense of justice served, and the bittersweet recognition that Anthony had prepared us for this very moment, even from beyond the grave. 2 hours later, the Harris brothers left the house defeated, exposed, and bound by a legal agreement my attorney had anticipated with precision. The future of Cypress Estate was secured exactly as Anthony had envisioned, not divided among greedy relatives, not sold to the highest bidder, but preserved as a complete legacy for Sarah and me. As their cars disappeared through the main gate, a cloud of dust lingered in the air. Mary appeared at my side and, with her usual serenity, said, "Your husband would be proud. You surpassed them just as he believed you would." I looked at her in silence as a surge of emotions washed over me, triumph mingled with grief, strength born out of vulnerability. We're not finished yet, I finally replied, thinking of the videos still waiting for me on Anthony's laptop and of the future he had imagined for us. This had been only the first battle, but we had won it decisively, using the weapons he had prepared so carefully, and the strength he had always seen in me, even when I doubted it myself. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind of practical matters. There were meetings with Blue Coast Resort to establish an agreement protecting the estate's most sensitive areas, long sessions reviewing documents to finalize the legal settlement, and a detailed inventory of every object, every corner Anthony had left as part of his legacy at Cypress Estate. Through it all, Sarah remained by my side. What had begun as resentment over her father's secrets gradually turned into respect and gratitude for his foresight. We created a new routine. Every morning we watched one of Anthony's recorded videos together, finding in his words comfort and guidance. One evening, as we sat on the porch while the sky turned orange, Sarah asked softly, "Mom, did you ever suspect? Did you have even the slightest idea that Dad was sick or planning all of this?" I thought carefully before answering. "There were little things that make sense now," I said at last. His insistence that we update our legal documents 3 years ago, the way he sometimes watched us quietly during dinner as if memorizing our faces, or his sudden interest in photographing daily life. Sarah gave a sad smile. "I thought it was just a midlife phase." "In a way, it was," I replied, "but not for the reasons we imagined. The most obvious change was that he stopped postponing things. Your father was always a someday man. Someday we'd take that trip to Europe. Someday he'd learn photography. Someday we'd redo the kitchen." And suddenly, instead of talking about it, he started doing it. Sarah nodded slowly in understanding. He was creating something that would last. "Exactly," I said, my throat tight. I thought it meant he finally felt secure enough to pursue his dreams. I never imagined he was really racing against time, building a legacy because he knew he wouldn't be here to see it flourish. When I finally met with the Blue Coast Resort executives, they were surprised by my conditions. Instead of agreeing to a full sale in exchange for a lump sum, I demanded a deal prioritizing environmental preservation, setting strict limits on development, and guaranteeing that the greenhouse and the art studio would remain untouched. Mrs. Harris, the lead negotiator, said, "These terms are very unusual in this industry." "Then maybe what this industry needs are unusual terms," I replied, letting Anthony's confidence flow through me. "This land is special, and it can wait until we find a responsible way to develop it." Against all odds, Mr. Thompson was not discouraged. On the contrary, he showed real interest. "Your husband mentioned that you studied literature and the arts before going into teaching. He said you would insist on doing this the right way, not just the most profitable way." And in that moment I realized another piece of Anthony's plan. Even these conversations had been anticipated and prepared by him. A month later, with my inheritance fully secured, I found myself in the art studio Anthony had built for me. Sunlight poured through the windows, illuminating the canvas on the easel. After more than a decade of not touching a brush, I finally dared to paint again. At first my hands trembled, but gradually confidence returned. My subject waited patiently in the greenhouse, visible through the windows, the rare blue orchid Anthony had sought and preserved simply because he remembered a comment I had made many years earlier. With Mary's help, who taught me the secrets of cultivation, my fingers began to recover the skill I thought I had lost forever. That afternoon, Sarah appeared in the doorway holding the laptop. "Today's video is different," she said softly. "I think you should watch it alone." She handed me the computer. It was marked with a special note, "When Elizabeth paints again." I pressed play and Anthony appeared, seated in this very room, though then it was still empty, with no easels or brushes. Just him, the bare walls, and those tall windows. "Hello, my love," he said with a smile that seemed to cut across time. "If you're watching this, it means you found your way back to art, back to the passion you sacrificed for our family all those years." I touched the screen with my fingertips, tears clouding my vision, as his voice revealed that this studio was not just a room, but part of his deepest legacy. I looked at the orchid portrait on my easel, stunned by how closely it matched the vision Anthony had described in his videos. His voice went on, "He had prepared everything to give me freedom. Financial freedom through the resort agreement, protection against his brother's schemes, a beautiful space to create. But he made it clear that what I did with that freedom would be my own legacy, not his." He leaned closer to the camera, his face serious, as if he wanted to leave no doubt. The house, the greenhouse, and the studio were not the inheritance, only the tools. The true inheritance was the possibility, the chance to become fully myself, unbound. I paused the video, heart aching. Anthony had known me better than I knew myself. He had seen the artist buried beneath the professor and mother I had become. When I resumed the video, his expression had softened. "I have one request, though it's yours to accept or decline. In the closet behind this room you'll find a large canvas I commissioned before my diagnosis. It's blank, waiting. When you feel ready, truly ready, I want you to use it to paint something that shows not only what you see, but what you feel for this place. A place that brought me back to my roots and can lead you toward your future." The video ended with his familiar farewell, "See you tomorrow, my love." I stood still for a long time, processing his words. Finally, driven by a force I couldn't fully explain, I went to the closet and found exactly what he had described, an enormous canvas, custom-made for the main wall of the living room, the perfect size to become the heart of the house. Weeks went by. Autumn spread golden tones across the landscape as I filled sketchbooks with drawings, trying to capture the essence of Cypress Estate and everything it meant. None of them felt right until one morning, as I watched Sarah tending the orchids in the greenhouse, something finally clicked inside me. The painting began to take shape little by little. It wasn't a traditional landscape but a fusion of the real and the symbolic. In the background stood the house, rendered with almost photographic precision. In the foreground, several translucent layers revealed its different stages, the ruined property Anthony had purchased, the house of his childhood, and beneath it all, the ancient land that had witnessed generations pass. Binding these layers together were three figures. Two stood in the front, a woman and a young girl, sketched just enough to suggest both a personal and universal journey. Behind them, almost hidden and only visible to those who knew where to look, was a man holding a blue orchid, offering it to the other two. When the piece was finished, Mary helped me hang it in the living room. Sarah stepped back and, with tears in her eyes, whispered, "It's Dad, isn't it? And that's us." She traced the figures with her finger. The past, the present, and the future of this place. Legacy, I replied simply. Not what is left behind, but what continues forward. That night, sitting on the porch of what finally felt like my true home, I sensed Anthony's presence, not as a ghost or a memory, but as a constant companion. He had not only left me a property or financial security. He had given me the structure to reinvent myself, the freedom to discover who Elizabeth Harris could be once no longer bound by circumstance. The agreement with the resort guaranteed me stability forever. The house would evolve over time under our care, and I would continue adding beauty to the world through my rediscovered talents, creating my own legacy alongside the one Anthony had so carefully designed. A few months later, while I was working in the studio, the doorbell rang. Mary appeared at the door, her face serious. "It's Michael Harris." He came alone. My body tensed immediately. "Did he bring legal papers?" I asked. "Not that I saw. He seems different, less arrogant. He only said he wants a few minutes of your time." I nearly refused, but curiosity won. "I'll see him on the porch." "Don't invite him in." When I opened the door, Michael looked thinner, with deeper lines on his face and an unusually humble expression. "Thank you for seeing me, Elizabeth." "What can I do for you, Michael?" Our agreement was very clear. "I'm not here to contest anything," he said, glancing at the property before meeting my eyes. "I'm here to apologize." Of all the things I expected, that was the last. I crossed my arms in silence. Michael swallowed hard. "I've been reflecting on Anthony, on our relationship, on my choices. I didn't expect you to win. I should have known, Anthony was always the smartest of us." "That's not an apology," I cut in. "You're right," he admitted. "I'm sorry for trying to take this house from you, for attempting to manipulate Sarah, and for making Anthony's life harder than he deserved." I studied him for signs of deception, but all I saw was weariness and what might have been genuine remorse. Then he said, "I have cancer. Stage 4. The prognosis isn't good." That puts things into perspective. The shadow of Anthony's illness returned all at once. "I'm very sorry," I said quietly. "I'm not here for pity," he continued. "I came because my younger brother built something beautiful here, and with my pride and greed, I nearly destroyed it." He pulled a small package from his pocket. "I found this among our father's belongings. I thought you or Sarah might want it." I accepted it cautiously. Inside was a faded photograph, 3 children beneath a huge tree, the smallest, clearly Anthony, holding a pot with a tiny orchid. "It was the first one he ever grew," Michael explained, his voice breaking with guilt. I looked at the smiling boy in the photo and then at the weary man standing before me. "Would you like to see the greenhouse?" I asked, surprising myself. He hesitated at first but then nodded. We walked together among the flowers Anthony had tended with so much love. In that moment, I saw Michael not as an enemy to defeat but as a man scarred by choices he could never undo. Forgiveness couldn't erase the past or change what was to come, but perhaps part of legacy was the ability to choose compassion over vengeance. I'll never know if the remorse that brought him to my door was real or just another calculated move. The only certain thing is that when he left, I felt something at Cypress Estate had shifted, as though a final chapter had closed. That very night I watched Anthony's last video. On the screen he smiled at me, his eyes filled with a peace I had never seen in him while alive. This is the end of our daily journey, my love. A year of messages to guide you through the first months without me, but it's not the end of us, he said, looking into the camera as if he could truly see me. We live on in your choices, in the love you share with Sarah, in the beauty you'll create from now on. The house I once feared is now yours to transform. The secret I protected has become your gift. The promise I asked you for has become your freedom. Never forget, Elizabeth, you were always the true strength between us. Until one day, my love. The screen went dark, and in that silence I understood that loss had transformed into possibility. The house he once feared had become the house he loved. And the secrets he had kept had turned into my greatest strength. That promise Anthony once asked me to make, only to later release me from, became the path toward my future. I rose and walked to the large painting hanging in the living room, gazing at the layers of past, present, and future captured on the canvas. Anthony had left me far more than a property, he had given me the chance to rediscover myself. That once feared house had become the one he cherished, and now it was mine to keep transforming day by day. And if you enjoyed this story, click on the next video appearing on your screen, where you'll find another tale of betrayal and unexpected twists like you've never seen before.